Wow, well, that was a great kickoff, I think, for the BIF Symposium here this year. There was a whole lot of information and concepts that I think justify a lot of consideration and talk, and I think it's going to create a lot of hallway conversations as well. And um, I think I have a really tough job to try to summarize all three presentations in a short period of time, but I've got 3 or 5, 6, 8 pages of notes, and it made me think though here at BIF, I always came here and I would fill up a notebook. And I think what makes this kind of a unique place and a unique thing was that notebook was important because I took home things that either fundamentally changed the way I thought about our industry, it changed the way I was going to breed cattle, or it changed the way or the direction we were going to take our operation. And I think BIF has always shaped our future by giving us a clear picture of what the future is going to look like. And I think this presentations this morning are a great example of that. I think you guys did a tremendous job of setting the table for us in this week's discussions. I guess I'll start with Michael's talk. What he said excited and scared me, which every one of these presentations did that a little bit. I guess I thought, you know, we're really pretty good at improving efficiency and making the traditional standards of quality in the cattle better. But I don't know if we're really good at understanding the consumer and understanding what their attitudes and their perceptions and what drives their actions. And we do have a changing consumer with a lot of different needs and desires that's altering our marketplace and is going to alter the way we do business going forward. On Dr. Pillen's talk, it definitely excited and scared me. I love to hear somebody that's had such incredible success and just to kind of get an idea of the scope of their business. I guess what impressed me were the culture and the principles that helped create that success. His emphasis on being disciplined just in terms of focus and simplicity. I love the statement where he said the best pig always wins or the best cow always wins. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. You know, and really all the presentations talked about understanding what the end consumers want in terms of our product, what they desire, and then how do we produce it in an efficient way that captures the most value. I thought it was interesting in Dr. Pillen's talk when he talks about the labor side of things, and we're all talking about that in all sides of agriculture, but they're even changing the way they breed their sows based on the labor situation. And I wrote down when he talked about the genetic progress or world-class performance, and then when he talked about discipline, he said there was no shortcuts, there was no secrets. And I think we're all guilty in this business thinking we have a secret or there's a special sauce. And it really comes down to execution. And then I thought his comments about solving problems that really exist and not creating problems in the process. And then finally with Dr. Thompson's sustainability, I think is a conversation that everybody's been talking about and we're all trying to wrestle with. And I was guilty as a producer when I hear sustainability, animal welfare, environment, all those things that you made a great case where that's who we are. I get a little hostile almost just about it because it felt like it was an attack. And I thought your point about sustainability is about selling more beef. And that was one of the things I guess excited me, as I said here from a producer standpoint, was that sustainability has a huge genetic component. It has a huge adoption of technology component. It's about marketing. It's about communication. It's about telling our story. And that to me is opportunity in a nutshell. And as you said, animal welfare is what we're doing. And I thought another really key point was that it's not just about checking the boxes off, which I think we're all guilty of when we start down this process, but it's really about continuous improvement and tracking our progress as we move forward. It's really about building and maintaining trust, and the beef is pretty special. And I apologize because trying to summarize those 3 presentations in 5 minutes is a really, really difficult thing when you're sitting here. But I know we got a lot of great questions, and so we're going to throw it open to.
One of the concerns that I have with a lot of these data is when you go out to ask the consumer outside of a grocery store what he likes to buy or what he prefers to buy, or this or that, hormone, no hormone, this or organic, how many times do you guys actually follow the consumer into the grocery store and see what that consumer is actually buying? I have a PhD in nutrition. And I had a friend here earlier with me that also does, and she has 2 kids. And I asked her, how many times do you go shop that you look at the nutrition label or the label itself? Never. And then so when we talk about and we look at Dan's presentation, there's a very small percentage of people that are concerned about some of these things, but we are changing our whole industry because of that small percentage, just because they're a little bit louder than we are. And then so on the studies that you guys done, how many have you actually followed the consumer into the grocery store and see what he buys?
That's a great question. In research, when you do any kind of research, and you ask questions about behaviors rather than actually physically track behaviors, you're going to get one answer, and oftentimes you get one answer and they do something completely opposite. That is always a challenge. What we've learned through the process, though, is that we're hearing about the consumers. It's more about consumers' attitudes and perceptions when we have those dialogues. But we also then go, and one of the other parts of the business that I didn't talk about in my presentation is we collect data from IRI and from Nielsen, who are 2 data providers who capture all the receipts at the front end of grocery stores. So we can actually marry the data with the concepts, the perceptions, the attitudes we're hearing. You can't live and breathe on attitudes and perceptions because, again, as you very rightfully point out, oftentimes we hear one thing and they do something completely different. But we are seeing the trends shift, and it's a slow shift, but we're seeing the trends and interest in these kind of platforms actually play out in the numbers that we're looking at. And so, and as we continue to talk to consumers, and in particular, the sweet spot again is those younger generations, the millennials and the Gen Zs. They're the ones we really need to be aware of. And the other thing we do is we spend time looking at trends more generally beyond meat. And if they're saying what they're saying in the meat category, and they're doing something completely different in every other trend we look at from every other industry, then we know we've got a problem. We've got a problem of misinformation, misunderstanding, poor communication on our part. But if we see it actually mirrored in other industries, that's going to be a more solid indicator that it is going to play out in our industry. So it's a very valid point. There are always some who say they do one thing, and then if you were to track them, they do the other. And there are actually a lot of studies where we do a 1-2 punch, what we call a 1-2 punch, and that we will actually have online surveys and or focus groups, and we'll talk to them about it. But then we do actually spend time observing in a meat case at the meat environment and find out what they pick up. We go and tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, can I have a conversation about your experience? And we actually collect that side of the data as well.
If I can follow up on the retail side too. One of the things, I just read a book by Talib called Skin in the Game. And, you know, the intolerant minority drives a lot of conversations. And so what grocery stores or retailers are trying to do is they're trying to cover the veto vote, right? That, oh, there's 5 of us going out for dinner. This person doesn't eat conventional or doesn't eat animal protein. So we have to go to this restaurant or we have to go to this grocery store. So they're trying to fit some of those niches in there from that standpoint as well, which may or may not be directly related to consumer data, but it is a reason why some retailers carry certain different types of things to cover that. It's no different if you're going to invite people over and you can only have one type of alcohol, you know, and you know the beer drinkers will drink wine, so you go with wine, right? And so and it's those kind of things and mentalities as we bubble to the top, and that continuously drives the consumer then and how we change and how we produce things. I think that one thing that he hit on really well was the younger generations. I don't think we can start young enough of imprinting education on food. And our church talked about how a person who hasn't come to faith by the age of 18, there's a 1 in 8 chance of that person coming to faith in their life. these kids are making decisions by the time they're 13, 14, 15 years old that sets the trajectory of their entire life. And so getting in front of them as a beef industry when they're in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, coloring books, doing all the things we used to have is so vitally important to them accepting us and being for us and with us, and that we're doing it for them. So that would be something that I don't have the data, but just the experience, you know, between the two of us, we'll get there.
Yeah, well, and I think about the slide that I showed on those who were familiar with or thought that they understood the definition of gene splicing characteristics in a product. They're much more likely to be open to trying it than those who have never heard of it. So that whole, when do we start them? And that young age is so critical. When do we start them? When do we get them familiar? And we've lost that. You said it. We lost that ability. I mean, when I was in high school, I was taking home economics or we had bachelor something or other. So I learned the basics of meal preparation and the nutritional value and all that. I don't think they offer those classes anymore.
No.
They don't offer them.
No.
We need to start a lot younger.
Next question. I was going to throw out here too, where I'm sure you guys have thought about that, but if we were to make you, each of you, industry czar for the day, and you had a chance to change one thing in the industry or from a genetic perspective, relative to consumer demand and sustainability, what would that be?
Wow.
Not much.
You know, and I'm just repeating myself, but we're doing such incredible things in this industry, but we're losing the share of commentary space. We also track media responses, and so we track through the course of time with my media crew, my social listening group. We track the number of mentions of products, beef, pork, chicken, lamb, of activists talking about vegetarians, veganism, the negatives, the positives, sustainability, all of those issues. We track it on a regular basis to see how things are flowing. And we try to find out what is being said positively about our industry and what is being said negatively. We're losing that battle. We're really losing that battle. While I think on the activist side, there aren't nearly as many of them as there are on our side, they have a plan. They're committed. They're working together as a unit in putting content and information out there, and they're attacking us all the time. We tend to take sort of we're the big elephant in the room perspective and don't feel like we have to be quite as active, but we really do. We really do. And I showed Brandy in the video, just someone like that writing a letter and having a voice and getting a platform. Those are the kinds of things we need to do more of, and we need to start hearing more positive chatter on all social platforms. And I really truly believe that at some point we need to set aside our differences and our competitive natures, and we need to work as one industry. And that is one of those platforms where I think that would be really incredibly powerful.
If I was gonna work on one thing, it'd probably be docility. And I know y'all are going to say, what the heck? Well, I'm a veterinarian, right? And so, one, I don't like getting run over, but number two, all mammals respond to stress the same way. And it's a release of mast cells. And so anything that, if the animal is not docile and the animal is not trusting of the human animal interaction, it doesn't let down its guard and tell you that it's sick or that something's wrong. And so for me, that trait is extremely important. We spend so much time in the feed yards now working on acclimation and acclimating cattle to calm them down so that they'll have trust in that human animal interaction. Obviously, there's a lot of things that go into that after the animal is born and the human animal interaction on the ranch. But that's something that's really important, I think. And what's amazing is now you're hearing the swine industry talk about intramuscular fat. You hear the swine industry talking about docility of sows because of group housing. Mm-hmm. So it's all interrelated. We're doing the same thing with laying hens. And if I wouldn't have come to Iowa State University, I wouldn't even known what a laying hen was. But anyway, I spent a lot of time in our laying facilities, and group housing takes a completely different animal than genetically than caged birds. And so having an understanding of that, when these animals are commingled, when they hit the feed yard, different things to that nature, that's something that's really, really important for all aspects of production for all species.
This is for Michael. When you were doing your research, do you see any kind of pushback when it comes to the differential in the price for the different products, conventional versus other?
Yeah, price is still the #1 driver for purchase. That has not changed. And it continues to be a challenge for us. I mean, look at what the price of beef is today. It's a challenge. What I continue to focus on, though, is the value equation. And consumers are much more aware of what they're looking for in all kinds of products that they buy. And through that process and through their research to understand, they're really gathering data and assigning a value. And if we can deliver on the value rather than just a price point, that's where we win. And so that's when I say, we need to be transparent. We need to be transparent because if we don't tell that story, somebody else is, and it's not going to be the right story, and it's probably not going to be a pretty one in some instances. But if we take the opportunity to tell the story, that's the value proposition. That's where it comes from for consumers. And the more they learn about what went into the care of that product and put it in the product, it's kind of like Dr. Dan here said, a well-raised animal produces a healthy animal, which produces a safe product, and there's value in that. So I think price is always going to be there. It's always going to be a big indicator. And if you put a list of things in front of a consumer, price is always going to be #1. But we can work against that. We can work that into our favor with what we offer.
This is probably for both of you. I'm from Missouri, and I just had to ask my husband, the average size of a cow herd in Missouri is 38. So when I look at especially the marketing data and the consumer segmentation that goes on, when I go back and I look at my fellow beef producers in Missouri, most of them have very small herds and they have very few resources. And I think they see this information and it's scary and overwhelming. Or they just don't know how it applies to them. And I guess if you were going to give me something to take back to them, what would be one point or one or two things that would help convince them to really get out there and communicate more, promote themselves more, or what would help them more to feel like they were making a difference, especially as we look at all this activism that is going on. And I think it really freezes everybody from wanting to do anything. We think it's the world against us kind of concept. I'll stop there.
I think the first thing I would do is recommend that they become involved in organized agriculture. Whether it's Missouri Cattlemen's or whatever, because it's not just about getting their dues. Okay. It's about, and that's a lot of people, they just want my dues. And no, it's about becoming informed and knowing how the industry and the checkoff is being used to help protect your interest, I think that's really, really important that people become informed, engaged, and involved. I think the other one that is probably overlooked the most is working with the three things: the local veterinarian, the local co-op, and the sale barn. Those three, getting those three involved in the education of people within the communities and around the communities. Extension is getting our state extension specialists involved with that. I think all these, it isn't like just an extension program or just a sale barn program. When the sale barn hosts it and extension's involved and the local veterinarians there, everybody's just kind of becoming a community and working together, and it can kind of take that stress or the anxiety over these bigger topics and understanding that our industry is made up of a bunch of 38 cow herds, and commingling is going to happen, and it's going to be, it's a, you know, but that is our strength. When we walk into a grocery store or meet with a consumer, we're family farm. We're, you know, we're using so few antibiotics. Our cattle are outside. I think I just keep focusing on the positives. We all get scared to death that the sky's going to fall and whoever's elected what is going to completely destroy our lives, when in fact we're still here. So those are the things, I guess, for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to add to that, because I thought that was an excellent question, but it revolves around everybody has a voice, and you need to use your voice. And even the smallest producer in whichever state you're from has the opportunity to have an impact on one or two people at least. And think about the fact that if you understand the challenges, the misinformation, and know where to get the resources and tap into the right communities, you can become a very powerful voice just talking with your circle, because that circle then talks to their circles, and the circles continue to build. It really starts at the ground zero point, and it's with the smaller operators like that in rural USA, where we need the most assistance. We really need the most assistance. So powerful. Use your voice, use your social platforms. And that's where the incredible stories come from.
Yep.
That's where the incredible stories come from. So much power in that.
Yep. And I think the other one is that I think no industry has a bigger impact on keeping rural main streets open than the beef industry. And having the understanding of that, and becoming engaged in the community leadership and thanks to that, that's getting the story out there as well, building trust.
Question online. Dr. Dan, you mentioned that there is a distinct difference in beef versus dairy beef. What is the distinction between the two in your definition? And if it's genetics and carcass quality, as improve the quality, do you see this product being a consistent source for retailers into the future?
Yeah, the difference between beef and dairy beef obviously is the system that they're raised in. And dairy cross and animals, embryos placed in low producing dairy cows is going to change our beef industry. There's no doubt about that. And I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think the work that needs to be done on carcass attributes of these different crosses, performance of these different crosses, and things to that nature. We all know there's a difference between a Holstein ribeye and a beef ribeye, and the shape and the different things to that nature. So I think that understanding more about what that's going to do or what that's going to look like, I think that's a huge opportunity in genetics. But the thing that genetics has to be is what was described this morning by Pillen, is that we have to measure these things in the field. We have to, one of the things that I'm learning more and more as I'm involved more in genetics with our group at Iowa State, is measuring the attributes accurately and verifying that what we say is going to happen actually happens, is going to be extremely important moving forward. And so on the dairy beef side, what I was really trying to drive home is that 50% of retail beef in the US, there's cold dairy cows, which is not something that people want to just go right out and say. But now if you can label it dairy beef, it's a different perception at the counter. And it didn't take very long for us to start using the term dairy beef when we were describing these beef Holstein crosses and what we're changing in our industry, for retail to just say, oh, well, it's all dairy beef. That's a lot better topic. A lot better. We fought the market cow, cull cow. It's so hard to say market cow. I'm sorry. You call them cull cows. That's what we've called them forever in the field. And now it's like, oh no, it's not cull cow. That's dairy beef. It's beef and dairy beef. So that's really what I was driving home, was that people are pretty smart.
Michael, you talked about, some of the trends in consumer demand, especially the younger generation, looking at more value type issues, and Dan, you talked about audits in the feed yard and showing the retail companies and McDonald's and others what we're doing. So the question is, I want to hear your view about trends in verified programs that bring that down to the cow-calf level. What's from both of your perspectives, what do you see as the trend for programs that are verified, auditable programs that bring that whole value chain together like you talked about?
We've done a little bit of work on verified, third-party verified programs and other little icons that consumers see. And I'll talk through it from the consumer's perspective from a research. Consumers are still struggling with understanding what they are, honestly. If you share content, information about what they are and try to educate them, they're better off. But if we just start throwing these little icons up and all of a sudden you got a package that has 15 different elements on it, it just confuses the heck out of them. And that's one of the challenges we have as an industry, is there's so much that we're doing and we're trying to put it on a little symbol and assume the consumer is going to get it. That's the education part. That's the communications part. And I keep on preaching it, but continuing to do the work, do everything we do so well, but find better ways to communicate that effectively to the consumer so they understand and give us credit for everything we do is significant. But when we specifically talked about like third-party verification, I believe the latest research had, and it's probably a year and a half, 2 years ago now, was that there was about a third of consumers who recognize a third-party verified, like the one I had on the package, and they're responsive to it. So once they see it and they get that it's available, they'll actually start looking forward and make some buying decisions based on that, because it gives them more of a sense of comfort and adds that a little extra value to the package that they're looking for.
Yeah, I think that, the one thing I have learned through regardless of what the audit or the assessment is, it'd be nice to have streamlined and have similar, one audit or one assessment. And so that it's more consistent for producers, and it's more consistent for the auditors. It's just as important who's writing it. George S. Patton says no good decision comes from a swivel chair. And so it needs to be people that have boots on the ground that understand production, but the auditors also need to be boots on the ground that understand production. So that's something that we have to work internally. But I've yet to be through one of these audits or an assessment or something where the producer didn't get something out of it. If it's done right, it's really done as a cross-check of your nutrition program, your herd health program, doing things that will actually improve the health and the well-being and that they do what they're meant to be. I don't think they should just be a pass-fail type thing. I think they should be a continuous improvement tool. And I think the other thing is that, and this is not a plug for my veterinary clinic, okay, but I really think that we need to figure out a way to make the local practitioner, the local veterinarian, part of the solution on this. They live there, they contribute to the local option budget, they're part of the community. And if we want to keep veterinarians in these rural communities, we're going to have to start thinking of different things. There are some technology coming out on, there's already technology out there, but pregnancy testing and some of the things that veterinarians were typically providing for us are going to they'll still be there, but they may be less as we see in the future, and figuring out ways to employ them, keep them around, and give them a service component to our operations, I think is important.
I love the concept that you've shared more than once during the comments that you made about if you're just operating to be good enough or just to pass, and you're concerned that you're not going to pass an audit, your motivation isn't quite in the right spot. You need to rethink why you're in this business and doing what you're doing. And I'll go back to the woman's question. I don't remember if Missouri or Mississippi, one of the
Missouri.
Missouri, sorry, big difference. In Missouri, again, when you've got a voice, use it. If you're, and this is, I guess this is an operational challenge. And remember, I'm at the whole other end of the line, but my thought is, from an operations perspective, if you're not comfortable in completely opening your doors and sharing everything you do every day and what you do with those cattle, then you're probably not doing what you should be doing with those cattle. So that's the challenge from an operations perspective. If you're not comfortable with inviting someone to jump in the pickup and come, let's go look at some cows. If you're not comfortable taking someone who doesn't know anything about what we do and put them in the pickup next to you and go out and look at your cattle, you probably better think a little bit harder about how you're operating.
Yep. Sometimes a person's dead level best is exactly what they can get away with.
I just have a quick follow-up to her question, talking about the verified programs. I think that it's maybe a question and a comment, that the challenge is for the producer, the smaller producers, because those programs have tend to be made for feed yards that are quite large. And here in Iowa, you know, the average feed yard is a lot smaller. And so being able to find the middle ground for those smaller producers to be able to be part of those programs and to benefit from them without having to make a huge input cost towards a technology that they can't afford to use in their program. So I don't know if you have any comments to that, Dr. Dan. You probably know what programs I've been involved in and seen.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of programs out there. And so when you get into this audit and the assessment thing, what I used to compare it to, because I think we have a good market system now, and I'm not necessarily in favor of auditing. Okay. Because we have veterinary client patient relationships, we have health papers, we have so many good things. And so if we have to do some of these things to gain market entry, that's different. But you know, the audits, as put up there, you know, that they don't necessarily change all the behaviors on the farms of the ranch. And it's really getting back to that, creating the culture, right, of wanting to get better every day. I didn't need to have a standardized test to figure out which classroom teaches accountability and does the best job of training students. You know, I can walk onto a farm in about 5 minutes, figure out a person's level of interest in their animals, you know, whether I need to have a tetanus shot, a lot of different things that are going on. And so I think it really gets back to the audits and assessments are there for market entry. As far as, you know, the cornerstone to all audits and assessments is beef quality assurance. And in my opinion, what we do with the education of beef quality assurance and what we do with beef quality assurance assessment, which is free to everybody, is the cornerstone and the foundation. Other programs will spool up, and if they help you make more money, then great. If they don't provide market access and increased revenue, you have to weigh the cost on whether it's, you know, when people went to in the 40s to find gold in California, more people made money off of selling axe picks, lanterns, and Levi's to the people looking for gold than the people that actually found gold. So that some of these can be that way as well.
So my question is about consumer acceptance, and this may not be in the wheelhouse of what you are presenting, but I'd like to ask it anyway. So within beef improvement, the market signals we're given is larger carcass weights, more marbling. The ribeye size has to get bigger because we're making more carcass weights. Then we're penalized for yield grade 4s and 5s. We're also told that the consumer doesn't want a ribeye that has been cut in half or altered. And so we get served a thinner ribeye because we're making a 16, 17-inch ribeye. In order to keep a portion size, they cut it thinner and thinner. So my question is, if you have any information on what can we do to make the consumer happy to make that ribeye size an appropriate size, but yet profitability on our end is to make a bigger carcass weight, to make more pounds, make the packer more efficient. So that's question one. Question two is intramuscular fat is actually fat. Do you see a day when the war on fat will come back and that will be a problem?
The biggest reason why we keep going to these heavier outweights is the way that we get paid today. As we get paid on a carcass basis, our most efficient time in the feeding period is at the end now, not at the beginning. Because it's at the end of the feeding period when the animal is actually laying down more carcass relative to body weight. Because if you slaughter an animal at 800 pounds and you have a dressing percent of 58, and you slaughter an animal at a larger weight and the dressing percent is 64, if you're at the middle of the batting of the season and you're hitting 250, and at the end of the season you want to be hitting 350, how much more do you have to, how many more base hits do you have to get to 350 the second half? So as we're feeding this carcass, it's an understanding that the most efficient time, instead of looking at feed efficiency, we should be looking at carcass efficiency, because that's what we get paid on. And so that continues to grow. Now, on the consumer side, I'll turn it over. I think we're going to have to look at different cuts. We're either going to have to go back to smaller, if we started selling live again tomorrow, we'd go back to a 1,200 pound animal at slaughter because of feed efficiency. But as we're selling it on the carcass, the most efficient time is at the end. So we're going to sell these 1,500 pound animals, which none of our plants were built for. None of our trucks were built for. It changes everything. And I think we're going to have to get back in the meat science labs. I think we're going to have to look at go back and look at, can we take different parts of that ribeye off and market different sections, different areas? I don't know. But to do the same thing over and over and think about splitting a steak, I don't think that's going to be the answer.
Yeah, and I guess my thoughts on the consumer side is we need to be creative. Consumers are concerned about the size of the cuts that they're offering. Retailers are concerned about the size of the price point on their packages when they put a steak that size in a package, because it all of a sudden, we talked about price earlier. Price can be a deterrent, and if you're paying $12, $15 for a steak at a retail store, there's going to be some concern there. Are they going to actually see that value? It makes me think back to the work on muscle myopathy and the value cuts we did on the rounds and the chucks a number of years ago, and where that's ended up. I mean, the flat iron continues to be a real popular steak out there. We had to think differently. We had to think differently about the carcass. We discovered new cuts. We pulled them out of the carcass. We probably need to start rethinking what's going on in the middle of the animal as well, and thinking about how we can be more creative. There's value in a steak, but there's also value in beef as an ingredient. And so we can't lose sight of the fact that the more creative we are and the more variety we offer, the more opportunities we have to land on the plate in a varietal solution. Lots of different options they can choose from. And you think about the size of that convenience chaser, the size of that population, and that they're looking for value and convenience, and their convenience means ingredients. How can I throw something together? I hate to see, us cut up a ribeye. There's a lot of value in that cut, but with what we're producing, we may have to be creative in that respect.
Michael, I was intrigued by the segmentation work, and as we look at that 6% of vegetarian vegans, are they steadfast in that group, or do consumers flow in and out of that category? And then secondly, any money, time, effort that we spend on that, is any of that fruitful, or we just ignore them?
Just money spent on that vegetarian group? Yeah, no, don't worry about them. We've been tracking ever since I was at the meat board. We tracked how many vegetarians are out there, because we thought that number was going to keep on edging up, and that was our biggest concern. It's not. That number has really never changed in all the years I've been in this industry. And it isn't vegetarians and vegans that are eating plant-based proteins. They're even more extreme. It's meat eaters who are looking toward all these other opportunities, and it comes out of the flexitarian category and or the protein progressives. So I wouldn't worry about trying to convince a vegan or a vegetarian to switch and all of a sudden become a meat eater. What I would worry about is all your young teenage daughters out there, and it's typically daughters, who decide one day that perhaps I could eat a little healthier, and that means I shouldn't eat red meat anymore. And I talked to someone earlier about red meat. I shouldn't eat meat anymore. Now, typically it's beef and pork they're talking about, not chicken. But sometimes they cut it all together and they become vegans. That's what I'm concerned about. At a very young age, they're messing with their body and the chemistry of their body and all of that. But if we don't start educating them earlier so that they don't feel like they have to hit in that spot, and that's where a lot of those numbers come from when we talk to those younger adults who start as teenagers and then continue as young adults on a vegan or vegetarian diet. They could then continue to be, as adults and pass that on to the kids, et cetera. It's that age range, those young adults that we need to be educating more intently so that they don't even get off the rails for a little bit of time. But in fact, we keep in and understand that we offer lean products. We offer a whole variety of different cuts that fit into a whole lot of different categories, depending on what your nutritional needs are.
I can tag team on this one because it's one of my major concerns. I watched the Ellen DeGeneres show, and she said, go to the plant-based stuff. And so I wrote a letter. Not being a vegetarian is not easy. It is an expensive, difficult lifestyle. And I just said, not everybody has the opportunity to have their own person shop for them, be their dietitian and cook for them. Right. And so I said, you can beat us up as farmers and ranchers. We're used to it. Okay. You can tell us that we are going to create a super bug, or that we don't care about our animals and they live in dirty conditions, and keep kicking us, right? Because we're used to being the end of this commentary. And tomorrow we're going to wake up and we're going to humbly go out and take care of our animals to feed our country. The people that they're hurting are not the farmers and ranchers. The people that they're hurting when they make these comments as celebrities are the children whose parents that see that don't understand what's going on and decide their kids are going to not eat meat, and they're not going to physically and mentally develop correctly. And so when they think that the people that they're being service to, they're actually hurting children in this country by going out and saying this, because that single mom with 2 kids knows if she throws a hot dog on the table, they're going to get the vitamins, the minerals, the protein, the fat that they need for proper mental and physical development. And so we have to remember, this is not an agricultural issue. This is a human health issue, and we have to stand up for our children.
I've been hearing education. Is the checkoff dollar not working, or is it somewhere where the center of the country doesn't see it? I mean, is it being used properly, or do we need to? I mean, I don't see it, but I live in rural northern Montana. I just
The checkoff, it's kind of like one of those things that if you don't think it's doing anything, have it leave. And I can tell you that it is doing incredible things with chefs, with people that are decision makers, with many, many different groups. And so I'm a big proponent and very thankful that we have the beef checkoff to promote beef. Now, I will say this, one of the things that the pork industry is doing in the state of Iowa is they have this trailer that they will take a pregnant sow to an elementary school or to a small school, a rural school, and that sow will farrow. They then, when they wean the pigs stay at that school. The kids raise those pigs, and then those pigs get slaughtered at a local locker, and they're going into their school lunch program. And now they're becoming they're us. They're part of the industry. And the sow then gets rebred and moved to another school. and it's going on across southern Iowa, and industry is being a part of it. And it's not just relied on checkoff, it's everybody pulling up their bootstraps. But I've been asked the question at so many different meetings about beef checkoff and if it's effective and if it's not effective. And it's one of those things that I firmly believe that our beef checkoff is fundamental to our success. And, who we have on there, they're doing a great job. And I say we just need to always get involved. But I know this, that if we didn't have it, and the amount of money that is behind some of these alternative protein groups and the other industries having checkoff, it would be devastating to our industry.
Yeah, I typically try not to step into politics, and this tends to be a hot button in some areas,
Yeah.
and no disrespect, sir, but my point is always, you're not the target. You're a believer. You raise it, you eat it. It's the checkoff dollars are somewhat limited, even though there seems to be a lot of them when you're paying in, but they're somewhat limited when you think about the size of the population that we talked about. I think you shared where we're going with the population numbers and where we need to be in order to talk to the consumers. I think a lot of the checkoff dollars are focused on urban settings where all the people are. As well, I have a pretty active social platform because I feel part of my purpose in what we do and the reasons for what we do in having this marketing company is to give back to the industry that I love and that I came from. And so I spend a lot of time working to talk to our industry. I don't talk to consumers a lot, but I talk to the industry about opportunities for them to communicate to consumers, to their consumer bases. And I share a lot of content that I see that I think is relevant. And probably the organization that I share the most content of is the checkoff system, because they have really good stuff. And I would encourage you all to look it up on their platforms, and they're in all of them. And when a lot of us, when we saw a lot of folks, and when I talk to my clients, honestly, my sweet spot for clients are packer processors, branded companies, and things like that. But when I talk to those folks, does it make sense to get on TikTok? Nah, not really. But as an industry, does it make sense to get on TikTok? Absolutely. And the cattlemen have a platform on TikTok that is really powerful. It's really effective. They had a hot dog program. They have, National Beef Month. They run fun, engaging platforms on TikTok that are going to get to that younger consumer. So I'm a firm believer of we all got to come together as a community. We've got to do a better job of having a voice. We've got to share relevant information. And they're one organization that is trying to do that. They're trying to pull it all together. And I think we just need to see more of that. And again, I'd encourage all of you go check out their content and like it and share it and make sure that you take it from, you've got a whole different follower than they do. They're hoping for an opportunity for you to grab it and you to share it. And then it gets out into the grassroots. It gets out into the urban areas. It gets out to a much broader audience than what they may have an opportunity to do.
I just want to comment on the teenage girl discussion. I was 14 when I became a vegetarian. I'm now 36 and a cow geneticist and working in this industry. So it's okay to let them go off the rails a little bit. I was a vegetarian for 10 years. My parents supported it, but we grew up in the city and they told me to go figure out what this was all about. So that led me to an animal science degree and a master and a PhD in genetics. So it was my experience with farms that led me to change my, thinking. But it was the love for animals that got me into both. So I just want to say, harvest that curiosity and that thing that they have in common, because these people, teenagers that become vegetarians often do it because they love animals, and you can easily show them that we do as well. So don't be afraid to, have that conversation but let them go off the rails a little bit. Don't be too afraid.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome.